Hi, my name is Jonathan Meads, and in this session we're going to talk about multifamily homes and what it takes to get to net zero, why it's important in this environment in BC, the greatest place on earth, what it takes to get there, what it means for our company, environmental sustainable governance, but also what does it mean for the homeowner? How do we educate everybody? How do we work as a team? How do we engage consultants and trades and the municipalities that we're in? And just holistically, what does a multifamily Part 9 home look like in the future? What do we need to do to get there? And how do we get to that net zero standard? This masterclass would be good for anyone really trying to understand at a larger scale. I'll be honest, we're not single family builders. What we're trying to do, the shift in the market for multifamily townhouses, and even, to be honest with you, what we've got to do towards condos. It would appeal to perhaps municipalities trying to understand what larger corporations are working towards. It would appeal to homeowners perhaps about what we're wrestling with, so you understand that bigger picture for the developer's perspective. But it'll also appeal to other multifamily builders. What have I done? What can you learn from it? What could you take away? My name is Jonathan Meads. I'm the Vice President of StreetSide BC. We're part of the Qualico group of companies. My history goes really back to university. I studied to become a chartered surveyor in the UK and specialised in project and development management. And it was actually at that time that through the architecture modules, I really became aware about what we now regard as sustainability. And in those days, we called it energy efficiency. We're talking 25 plus years ago. And my dissertation was actually on how we can make design and build buildings more energy efficient because they were built quickly and didn't perform well. To be honest with you, for the next few years, I was focused on building my career, and it wasn't really till I came here that I realized at that time how much more advanced Europe was in its design and practices, and slowly became more and more interested in how we can deploy that. After starting with cooperators, I moved to Concert, quite a few years ago, and working with Brian Macaulay and Dave Podmore there, had the opportunity to really start getting engaged in sustainability. They saw it as a future need. It was where the industry needed to go, and at the time it wasn't there. I stepped forward and said, well, I'm interested. And what started to drive it for me was, from a personal level, was my kids. I just had my wife and I had just had our first child. And I suddenly realized, what am I leaving the future? And that there's a great Kenyan proverb that says, we don't inherit the land from our parents, we borrow it from our children. And one of the senior staff at Concert, Arifa Mtula, told me that proverb, and I've never forgotten it. So it really awakened a thought process around what do we leave our next generations. So I stepped forward and said, right, I want to learn about this, and just started to learn off the side of my desk. And then LEED kicked off. So I went and did my AP accreditation and really started to try and work initially in the background to turn our buildings into better performing and more sustainable buildings. The interesting piece with Concert is it's not just building for sale condominiums, but a large portion of its function is income property. And as well as building condominiums, we were also building rental homes. And we were starting to say to ourselves, what do we need to do more? And at that time, there's great examples of even how just some simple things weren't working. We were building a tower in Toronto, actually, and the mechanical room, it doesn't make sense to have a light switch because the trades just never remember to turn the switch off when they leave. So the lights are on 24/7 in a space unoccupied. We briefed our consultants to use motion detectors. And frustratingly, when the building was completed, the switches had reappeared. And when we did our post-mortem, drilled into it amongst several other things, and we did it as a cost-saving measure. And it blew me away. It blew us away because a $10 switch had been switched out to save for a $1 switch. despite the fact that over the life of that function, you'd have saved $10 in electricity. And that was really the start of a much bigger push. Over time, we moved into gold buildings. We were working out at UBC with the REAP program, which is similar to LEED. And we really just started to try and build better buildings and better performing buildings. Learned a lot along the way. And then 5 years ago, I needed just a better balance for myself. I live in the Valley and the commute was taking its toll. Moved to Qualico. In moving there, I was able to put forward my knowledge and experience, and I was given free rein to deploy it. So we started down a road of just trying to build better homes and more efficient homes. And what really kicked it off for me was in my time at Concert, I'd been engaged through the UDI with the City of Vancouver's Green City Plans, back with Dave Ramsley, but also with the province and the development of the Energy Step Code. And I'd been heavily involved in it. I knew what was going on, but I knew what was coming, and I just could see the future and the municipalities really wanting to deploy the Energy Step Code more and more. And obviously today we're at a point where they're actually going to leap to step 3, which is great. We always wanted it to be step by step, but that allowed people to get on board. And those that haven't have perhaps been sticking their head in the sand for the last few years, because we are at a point where we need to be building these better buildings. I don't need to preach about things like the carbon dioxides that are in the environment and stuff. We've got record highs, and when you look at the charts over thousands of years, it's a very simple pattern, and then suddenly in the last 100 years it leaps. We've got to make this shift, and the province will force those that don't want to make the shift to make it eventually. But we made the decision, and I put it forward to the VP at StreetSide at the time, Mike Garrett, that we needed to take steps now. And he supported it. And coincidentally, at the time that we started to put a plan together within StreetSide to do this, Qualico launched a sustainability working group within its range of companies. And Qualico has operations based out of Winnipeg, but right across Western Canada and even down in Texas. And the banks were starting to ask questions. What are you doing from an ESG, environmental sustainable governance standpoint? And we started to think about figuring out what that would look like for Qualico. And over a couple of years, we mapped out, well, through consultants, these are what our typical buildings look like. This is how they perform. And it wasn't bad, but it wasn't excellent. And we were aware that the market was shifting. So we started to set about trying to learn here in BC how to improve our buildings, but more globally across the Qualico group of companies, what do we do to set a standard for people to follow? And the Energy Step Code here in BC really was probably the primary set of metrics that could be deployed easily in any environment, because it addressed climate zones, it addressed energy use, it addressed the TEDIs, the thermal energy demand, the mechanical energy use, etc. And so we actually decided we would adopt it. And the senior executive supported that proposal. So we now internally have challenged every business unit within Qualico to take steps along that path. Obviously, other provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, haven't got as far as we have, but the new National Energy Code will obviously push that further. But our CEO, Kevin Van, decided about 18 months ago he wanted to challenge everybody to build a net zero display home. At this point here in StreetSide BC, we already knew kind of what that would take to get there, and it was probably the last push we needed to get there. I've always tried to stay on top of learning and understanding around this stuff. I kind of knew in myself what we needed to do, but it was having that knowledge that actually corporately they would support the additional cost it would take to get there. And there is cost, there's a lot of learning, and started to deploy what I knew we needed to do by getting other people trained and learning, and working with people like BCIT and CHBA on the net zero programs. We started to map out what a net zero display home would be for a townhouse. We're going to be the first multifamily division of Qualico to build a net zero ready townhome. It's a little bit different to our sister company Foxridge and what they're doing, where they can build a single standalone home in 9 months. Ours takes 18 months, 2 years to spin around. So they're going to be ahead of us, but we're getting there. The path to getting there, though, like I say, started 5 years ago. We started off very simply. I wanted to know how leaky was a typically built townhouse. So we engaged E3, and they came in and did some blower door tests on a block of townhouses where we hadn't told the site super, we hadn't told the trades we were doing it. We just announced we were going to do it, so that they didn't do anything different to normal. The good news story for us at StreetSide was actually our homes performed better than average, but it also meant we knew where we had now a baseline, and we knew what we needed to do, and we started to put in plans. So over the next few projects, we would identify townhouse blocks where we'd say, okay, let's try this, let's try that. We talked to our consultants. What does an airtight drywall approach look like? We went down the route with error barrier as well. And over the last 2 to 3 years, it took a year of planning to get this going, but over the last 2 to 3 years, we've taken our air leakage rates at mid-construction level down to 0.6. The final, unfortunately with townhouses, one of our experiences is the final number is just above 1. 1.5 is our commonly achieved number right now, but that's working on a step 2 and step 3 energy rated building. Obviously, we know what we've got to do, and we know we can get to that 1.5. So now our net zero, it's just going to require a bit more work for us to understand and manage the trades to keep that air sealant rating at below the 1. And it's simply things like the cabinet guys come in and hang on an outside wall, and now they're puncturing the barrier. I would say the error barrier for us at multifamily level has been a big success. We have to address party walls, and obviously a variety of trades coming things is a lot harder to manage at that minute level versus, say, a single family home, all of the paths for air leakage. So error barrier amid construction coming in, and just after drywall, sorry, and running an error barrier seal helps us to get there. And I'll be honest, for the next while, we will probably continue to deploy that. Energy-wise, again, as part of this process, Qualico also said, okay, we need a baseline as part of our reporting. So if you go to Qualico's website, we don't actually tell you how well all our business units perform right now. And that's because we want to gather enough data that's meaningful that we can say, look, here is our baseline and here's how we're performing. At the StreetSide level, we've been Energuide rating every single townhouse for 3-4 years, pre-COVID. I can't remember the exact time, but it was interesting, and it's been interesting to map our the step 1 homes. Yeah, we were on par, maybe a little bit better than the base code, but as we got into step 2, we suddenly saw that drop. Yep, we're 10% better. Step 3, we're 20% better. And we're continuing to do that, and we're going to continue to Energuide rate our homes. It does give us that baseline, but it also allows us just to demonstrate some of the things people don't see in the homes. So HRVs, that air sealing approach we're taking, they are all improving the home's performance. And as we get to the net zero, it's part of the telling that bigger story about what we've done to get there. One of the other questions about why we got into this, it goes beyond just what I personally feel needs to be done, or what Qualico feels needs to be done. But yes, it costs more, but this is about our future. It's about what we are doing for homeowners. And possibly one of the differences between sort of custom single family and what we do at multifamily level is we're able to provide homes to, when I say the masses, that sounds slightly wrong, but you understand what I mean, to a large majority of the population who maybe or don't have the wherewithal to perhaps afford that specifically designed single family home, but also don't have the ability to get a multi-family home to that level. And it's looking forwards at this point. It's about how do we set our buyers and the general public up for success in the future? How are we going to shift our housing stock to higher performing homes? So by building them and offering them we're now putting those homeowners almost a bit more future ready than the current homes are. It is beyond the minimum mandated requirements. The minimum mandated requirements are getting much better. A net zero home now sets somebody ready for the longer term. I know we're talking about net positive homes, etc., but at townhouse level, I don't know that we'll ever get to that. And the reason I say it is there's some even legal implications, and again, learning thing as a result of deciding to do this. Part of our study, obviously, we did solar access study. Okay, if we wanted to get to net zero fully, or if we wanted to allow the homeowners to get to net zero in the longer term fully, what does that mean? Well, okay, we knew how much electric photovoltaics we needed to put on the roof to run our net zero homes. So our net zero homes, I should clarify, we've decided to be completely electric. So because the on-site renewables at a townhouse level become challenging. So we've switched our hot water tank to a heat pump hot water tank. We're using a heat pump for heating and cooling. We are using an induction cooktop. We're also on our net zero ready homes, we're not even putting a gas outlet for a barbecue on the balcony. We're going to obviously look at what we can do with electric barbecues options and things too, and we'll demonstrate that in time. But for us, and for me personally, it was perhaps more about let's address the carbon piece too. Now, granted, the renewable natural gas thing's coming, and from what I read, it's going to have a lot lower emission factor, possibly lower than our hydro emission factor, but it's not there at the volumes we need for us to make that decision today. So going back to the photovoltaics, we've made this decision to be an all-electric home, and we will look at the solar access. Okay, that now governs the amount of efficiency the home needs to be. But the interesting piece with the Strata Property Act is that a townhouse strata owner doesn't actually own the roof. They don't own the sloped roof or that space on it. It's owned by the entire strata. And that's deliberate from so many other reasons to do with the maintenance of the roof spaces, and it's a common shared cost. But we've actually had to work with our lawyers to figure out how do we structure this so that there is the access for these homeowners in the long term to be able to put photovoltaics on. So we've figured out that legal process. I do want to touch on the photovoltaics, and people already said, why haven't you put the photovoltaics on and gone the full extent? And I'm going to be quite honest with you. At this point, photovoltaics on a townhouse, it's the cost factor. We've already taken on quite a lot to get these townhouse blocks. And we're actually going to build 4 townhouse blocks that will be net zero. We didn't just want the one kind of the display home block, which was our corporate challenge, was to build the display home. We said, well, if we're going to build this, we need to be able to sell enough that there's opportunities for people. We spent a lot of money getting to this point, and we still, I'll be quite frank, we haven't figured out exactly what the cost of these homes will be. We are tracking carefully all our costs. We've broken ground in our trades. We're just spooling up all our trade commitments and tenders. But the photovoltaic piece became challenging for us because right now the payback exceeds the life of the photovoltaics. At least that's the advice we're getting. And don't get me wrong, there's reasons for other people to perhaps deploy photovoltaics if they're in a larger home, and I've seen this just in and around where I live, where people are using it to offset electrical load so that they don't hit tier 2 electrical charging. I again appreciate BC Hydro is reviewing the charging rates, and that may change. But the challenge for us is the feed-in tariff. And I'm going to be quite honest, I've been vocal about this for a few years. 7 or 8 years ago, the feed-in tariff was 7 cents a kilowatt hour, and our electricity was, I think, 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And Hydro dialed it down to 2.5 cents. And I have my own opinions on why they did it, but I don't agree with it. And I actually think it's reduced the deployment of photovoltaics, because for those hot summer days, spring, fall, when we have days of sunshine, the home doesn't need all that electricity, so you're feeding it back, but the value that you recuperate doesn't catch up with the cost of the base capital installation. So we're going to leave rough-in pipes to each of the homes so that they can add photovoltaics in the future. But we've also structured the roof so it will take the load of those photovoltaics, but we're just not going to put them on. that's probably a different scenario for different people, and everyone will make that decision in their own right. Foxridge, our sister company, our single family home builder, they are building a net zero home, and they're actually building it to full net zero certification rather than just net zero ready. They are putting the photovoltaics on. They have a larger roof space which directly serves that single home. It's a freehold home, so they don't have to answer to a strata about what's going on the roof. And they've made the decision to go remain with some gas services, partly I think the cooktop, but also just the hot water. And again, these are all, there's various trade-offs you can make depending on what you want to do. And it may be that we do go back to using gas when we know renewable natural gas is widely available. To talk a bit about the journey I've taken, I'm pleased about where we are now. I've always been chomping at the bit to move further in the past. And I think there's some really good lessons to learn from there. I may have taken longer than others to get there, but I've always tried to deploy a couple of different things. And one thing to remember is always keep pushing. When you hit a wall, think about how you can go around it, through it, over it, under it, because there are alternatives. Every time you come across something that you don't understand, you're not alone in not understanding it. But just keep looking for opportunities to learn about it. There's lots of courses. HAVAN CHBA, the Net Zero program, offer videos, and BCIT obviously, but there's plenty of other places. The internet is a wealth of information these days. When I first moved out here and was trying to deploy what I'd learned in the UK, it was hard to even just find products available here. And even, to be honest with you, there was even skepticism about somehow some of the European or Asian market products could be deployed here. And now we're seeing it commonly applied. Back then, I didn't know how to convert that from a European kind of understanding to a North American understanding, and it is different. But just keep persevering and like I say, keep educating yourself. A good example is the VRF. It's now widely deployed in office buildings, and it makes a lot of sense. It's taking the cold and the warm that's in the building and sharing it before it uses the base building systems to make more heating or cooling. I'm explaining that at a very high level, and I'm not a mechanical engineer. I can't explain the intricacies of how the box even determines which way heat and cooling is sent. But understanding how you can use that in a building. People like LG go on their site and learn, and it does take time to learn this. But the more people you talk to, these days we need energy modelers. They're a wealth of information about a whole variety of things, whether it's heating and cooling or mechanical systems. They may not be the final engineer that designs it, but they can help you understand it at a high level. The other thing for me is don't be afraid to ask. If you don't know, especially if you're at a webinar or a seminar, if you don't know, ask the question. So many people just sit there quietly going, oh, I don't want to look stupid. But actually, if you don't know, the odds are half of the audience don't know that answer or that item too. And they're probably also sitting there thinking, oh God, I don't want to ask that. I don't want to look stupid. But I was one of those that perhaps stuck my head over the parapet more than others and asked those questions. And if not in the public domain, would wait till the end and then actually inquire directly with the speaker. Hey, tell me about your HRV system. I want to understand, can I add cooling to it? Or how does this work? Or, where does it go in the building? How do you deal with sound on it? And it is about educating yourself. And the more you know about something, the more you're also able to challenge your consultants. Talk to the trades. They're becoming aware of it, especially mechanical trades. They're acutely aware of where the demands are going, or at least the educated ones. And you'll very quickly pick up if they're educated or not. And I can tell you I've recently renovated my own home. And whilst I need to deal with the envelope, we've upgraded all mechanical systems, and actually I've disconnected from gas. And the interesting piece there, we were trying to figure out what to do with hot water tanks. We had one of your traditional 70% gas hot water tanks. We've actually gone to a heat pump hot water tank, and we're still trying to figure out the settings. We've only been back in the house a few weeks, but in trying to find a plumber to install it, to purchase one and install it, we talked to a lot of different people, before we actually found a contractor's like, yep, I know how to get those, I know what to do. And then was able to explain to me how to ventilate it and what we need to do for air, and was able to, in an educated format, explain to me, well, you've got to understand it's drawing warm air in and it's pushing cold air out. So even though it's in one room, unless that room's big enough, you need to duct at least one of them. Well, I talked to probably 4 or 5 plumbers who were just like, well, no, you don't really want to go with that. You just need a tankless gas condensing boiler that's 97% efficient. Well, I've got a hot water tank with an efficiency factor of 4.0. But like I say, keep asking the questions, and you'll find, you'll start to sense for yourself when that person knows what they're talking about and gives you the confidence to go with them. It's important to understand that this matters differently at different levels. I've always worked in multifamily homes, condominiums and townhouses, and single family homes are different, especially custom single family homes. The custom builders out there are probably the leaders, and it's because, yes, the home costs more, but the person building that home, engaging a contractor to do it, typically has perhaps more disposable income and is able to invest and assist that contractor in investing in newer technologies. So they've learned faster, plus their time frame is quicker. You've got to remember, a single family home is typically not needing a development permit. It's typically in a space zone for a single family home. They just need a building permit. And in some municipalities, that building permit may come in 3-4 months. So you can design the home, 6 months later you start construction. They're also able to explore things like ICF on a smaller scale. And what I'm getting at there is for me, in building, right now we're working on part 9 net zero. We're wrestling with part 3 as well, but the townhouse process is different. It takes a lot longer to make the shift, and I'm not trying to make excuses. I'd love to have done it quicker, but there's other factors such as financial. We've got to know we can afford to do this, because there's a lot of costs to learning, and I'll come back to that. But the development process for a townhouse, sometimes you need to rezone the land, but we have to get a development permit. And in most municipalities these days, that's taking 2 years plus. We then need a building permit, another 6 months. And then the build time, 9 months plus some servicing. So you're often 2 to 3 years until we've got a product finished, versus maybe a year and a half for a single family home. So they're able to deploy things as, for example, heat pump hot water tanks. They can have something up and running and testing within a year and a half, 18 months. We're a year and a half behind them before we can really do it. So we do get to learn from them, but it also allows us to figure out what we need to do. I just want to touch on the cost piece too. In making the decision to learn, to build the net zero ready homes that we're about to build, we've broken ground in Langley. We've done a lot of learning, like I say, through testing with other homes, deploying HRVs early, looking at heat pump hot water, etc. But the interesting piece is our consultants are still learning. So when we made the decision, we already had the project design at a development permit stage. It was going through the municipal approval process, and we approached our consultants, and they actually did come back saying, okay, it's going to cost us more. And we get that. There's a learning cost. Yes, they're learning from this process too, but we and they can't do everything for free. So we have to figure that out. What became very apparent, and a big learning lesson for us again, is it's not just about talking to trades. For us, we have to use consultants. We need our schedules, etc., and our PNG and architects. And we actually had to change mechanical consultant. The first consultant was just uncomfortable with the change, and they were honest with us. They didn't have the knowledge in-house and necessarily to see this through to the extent we needed it wanted it to be. And I appreciate their honesty, because we would have had a lot harder learning curve had we continued with them. And it's evident in talking to them and working through the initial stages with them, they hadn't stayed up to date. And you'll get that. You'll be able to talk to a consultant and go, okay, yep, they're up to date. They understand what they got to do, and know what we've got to do to get there. But there are people still catching up. Everyone's on the path somewhere these days within the industry, but I think we've been pushing the forward end of the envelope. We're not going to be the first net zero ready townhouses in Metro Vancouver. We will be in the Fraser Valley, but there are some in Coquitlam and North Van that are ahead of us. And I'll be honest, we kind of even on the mechanical consultant level, in trying to understand who to go to, we did look at those, and actually in the end we found a consultant that really is totally dialed in, but really is quite a leader, and actually was able to suggest to us some steps to take and measures to allow us to achieve the net zero homes. The other part in just getting to this is it's gauging the municipality. We are aware that not all, for example, building inspectors, electrical inspectors, plumbing inspectors are yet up to speed. Municipalities are still taking steps to train and educate their staff, and that's important. We need those municipal employees, when they come out to a site, to understand what they're looking at. And we've been very lucky with the township of Langley, which is where our project's going to be. They've been very engaged in working with us, and in fact want to use it as a learning tool for their staff and others to come and see what a net zero townhouse will be. And I need to point out, this is a net zero ready townhouse that looks like anything else in the market. We haven't, when I say gone funky, we've tried to play the design to be safe. But it is interesting, just dwelling even on that piece and sticking with the design, learning lessons, not just from this project, but from some others we've been looking at too, how there is still a need to learn beyond just the inspectors, but even planners. We've noticed a lot of municipalities, the planning department, well, the sustainability team sits within the building and engineering side of the departments. The planning department carries on doing their thing, and we even have planners telling us which orientation a building needs to sit. Well, no, we need the consultants, because actually we've realized the planners don't always know and aren't always correct, and they're exercising some opinions that don't always jive. So there's still learning to do within the industry that way. But once you can get the orientation right, now we've got to think about the building envelope. What do the windows look like? What does the shading look like? And again, continuing to talk to trades, continuing to talk to consultants. We'll work through those different challenges. There are locations where, because of the orientation, we maybe don't need triple glazing, we maybe do double glazing. But as a result of getting those orientations right, and part of it's access to light and solar heat gain in the winter, maybe there's a need for shading in the summer, or there's a potential for overheating. So now we need cooling in the summer, and we're working through those through modeling on every project. But getting back to the piece about just going down this path, keep talking to your consultants, keep talking to the trades, and even suppliers. The trades are reliant upon on different suppliers, and those suppliers talk directly with the manufacturers. So learning about heat pump hot water tanks. Okay, the trade didn't, I've been dealing with on my own home, didn't know all of the questions I was asking, but actually put me in touch with our local supplier, and they were actually able to reach out directly. I've actually bought a Ream product, and they actually went back to their head office and the engineers and said, look, this person's looking at how does he get the heat to this place. So what I actually have a plan to do is although my heat pump hot water tank, and this is just one example, sits in a basement mechanical room, I live in a split level home, I'm actually going to duct the warm air intake to the roof, and I'm actually going to draw from within my roof space the free heat that exists for 9 months of the year into that heat pump hot water tank, so that it's having to work not as hard to create that heat. I'm also ducting that cooled air actually out into my garage. It might sound odd, but my garage overheats in the summer. Well, now I'm going to have cool, dry air blowing in there, and it will reduce that overheating. And it's not a space I need to temper, but it's a means of removing that cooled air in the winter as well. Glazing. I mean, I could talk about all of the different products, but even windows, yeah, we hear a lot about fiberglass frames and triple glazing, and yes, passive house and air leakage and everything else. There's a whole series of different factors, but don't be afraid to go on websites and learn. Call up companies. There's local companies that really do know what they're doing and have products that work. triple glazing in a vinyl frame. The vinyl frame might be quite small, but let's say you want a back door with some light through it, triple glaze it. Well, actually you may be able to achieve necessary heat loss tolerances without having to go to that fiberglass frame. I'm going to touch a bit on the changes we made to get to this point, and in essence, change management. The biggest single thing, it's about education. And I can tell you, we've I wouldn't say had battles, but we've had good discussion, healthy discussion internally, even in our office, about how do we get there, what do we do, what does it mean? A great example is our sales team still want to just call everything air conditioning. The market, there are many developers and realty companies that talk about, oh, you've got air conditioning. Well, we haven't. It's only heating and cooling. Air conditioning can, in essence, take something down to 0 degrees if you need to unfreeze it. And that's why you see frozen pipes, frozen coolant lines and things. Well, a heat pump doesn't do that. So even at that level, there's the need to educate the rest of your team. And it goes beyond just internally. I'm fortunate in that I was passionate about it and pushed the team, but was supported corporately to do this. And we've put funds aside to do it. And I was allowed to put that into my business plan, and as such, was able to pay our consultants to do the revisions, our staff for training. We've sent several staff through different net zero courses now, but also we dedicated time internally to learn about these things. Our development team who handle the design, what does it mean to be putting a heat pump hot water tank in? How do we ventilate it? Where do we ventilate? We all wrestled with heat pumps. Where does the heat pump go? Because in a townhouse, it goes on the front and the back. Interesting note, planners don't like them on streets. So now it's at the back. Okay, well, where do we put it at the back? Because that's where the garage sits. So we're having to get creative with some of those design challenges and finding solutions. And to be honest with you, once we started to talk about it and the team realized actually we've got a chance to really get ahead here, they got on board fairly quickly. So the next step was about educating our outside team. Mention the consultants, but trades. We've been doing a lot of work. My construction team's been doing a lot of work in the tendering process to speak to the trades and ensure and identify that specific trades can handle this. The challenges I mentioned about mechanical trades and plumbers, but also electrical. It's commonplace, and in fact, frustratingly, on one of our buildings where we had actually been testing air leakage, an electrician had forgotten to put the doorbells, pre-wire the doorbell wiring. Just started drilling holes through a building where we'd actually done an air barrier test. And looking back, we realized that one, it met the step 2 requirements it needed to achieve, but actually we need to do more on handling that on-site piece. So going to net zero, we were really trying to make sure that certain trades truly understand what it means to be building the net zero. And yes, our consultants have specified the products, the lights and the HRV and the even the EV chargers and things. But it's about ensuring certain trades understand the air leakage, the framing. Obviously, we self-perform. So our own site, for this project, our site super, we've put him through the training. So our own team is getting on board with understanding what it needs to be done. But we're talking to the framers and making sure that the air barrier details, etc., are being followed. Our siding companies, whichever siding company, we need them to be expressly on board so they're not just randomly creating extra holes. Our mechanical, electrical. But then even at finishing level, if we've got a kitchen on an outside wall, how are we going to hang it? And how do we ensure that they're hitting studs and in essence minimizing the air loss? And if they miss a stud and they create a drywall hole, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to fill it? And it's all about educating those trades. And as such, our construction team has actually been, in order to prep for this, they actually have been calling the trades in for their normal sort of interview as part of the selection process, but expressly we've been going through, okay, what's your plan for this? What's your plan for that? And we need to make sure that, as I say, you get a feel for it. You get a feel for those trades that actually understand what they've got to do versus those that might be umming and ahhing, and we'll be able to get there. But the other part about education and the final success for this is the homeowner. Net zero buildings, we've tried to make them perform as much like any other home as possible. But I can tell you from my own experience when first put heat pumps in, great example is people don't realize something as simple as changing the filter regularly and when you're supposed to can impact the performance. One of the first projects I put was a LEED Gold building, but we put heat pumps in. I forget, 6 months or 8 months in, we started to get a lot of warranty complaints. Oh, our heat pump's not working. And our technicians were going out, warranty techs, and they were all tripping out on low flow. Well, when we looked into it, the owners hadn't replaced the filters. They were now clogged with dust and everything else that occurs. And it's a maintenance thing. So the other piece we're working on from a variety of ways is with our sales and marketing team is about educating the homeowner. And it's not just the handover process and giving them a manual and explaining what to do. It's at the sales point too. So we're planning to have some boards explaining what we're doing. The realtors, and I've got to be honest, realtors have got a long way to go to catch up with the rest of our industry. In fact, even on this project in partnership with the township, we're planning to have realtor sessions. We really need them to get on and understand what a net zero home is, how it performs, because they are part of the key education process with the owner that's making a decision to buy this. As part of the purchase, they do need to understand this home's a bit different. Heat pump hot water tanks aren't like tankless. There isn't endless hot water, for example. There's enough hot water, and we'll certainly be putting in big enough tanks to accommodate the home size. But understanding there's a recovery time, and it goes back to those more traditional tanks where you empty it, and or even an older electric hot water tank that takes a while to recover. But beyond that, understanding how the HRV and the heat pump work. And yes, it's not actually going to, the home's not going to do what it says on the can, the Energuide label or the step code or the net zero label, if you leave the windows open but leave the heat pump running and the HRV running. They've all got to operate in sync, and explaining to people how those work, because the heat pump's only going to work harder if you're calling it for be 22 degrees, but oh, it's nice outside at 15 and you want some fresh air. They're never going to work together. So we really are starting to try and map out what that handover process will look like. We already use videos with our homeowners, and we're going to probably have to deploy that even in more detail. Our warranty technicians, we're actually, as we get further down this road and prep for turnover, we're going to have to spend more time in the homes with them. And that's not a bad thing. It's about them learning so they can also explain, because this isn't a one and done. This isn't where we hand over the keys, say, thanks very much, call us if there's a crack in the drywall. This is, we know homeowners are going to call us at 3 months going, I don't get it. My heat pump's always on heat. Okay, let's understand what's going on and going in. So we're trying to plan ahead for that stuff. And that's probably another learning lesson, is it's not just about learning what we need to do to get there, but think ahead as to what's coming and how we need to get there for the homeowner to be successful. Because the old saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's the same with the homeowner. You can provide them with the product, but if they don't know how to operate it, it's not going to work the same. The kind of the MO we've got with not just our warranty process, but it's going to be explain, explain, and explain again. If we have to make more videos, maybe that's what we need to do. We are lucky that we have a team that's energetic and is keen to learn, and engaging them hasn't been as hard as I thought it may be. Like I say, we've had different healthy debates about what things mean, but holistically, when you say to the team, okay, who's up for doing an explainer on this? We've got people, good, eloquent people that have stepped up, and we've done some great videos, and we'll continue to do that. We've had people ask us why we're not doing this entire project as net zero ready homes. And I think the interesting piece is the market is still transitioning. Brian McCauley always called it the tsunami. You get those early adopters and then the tidal wave and then the late adopters. And he's quite right. We're still in an early adoption stage when it comes to home, the purchaser's understanding of what all this means. It's becoming more prevalent. And ironically, I think the adoption here of EV vehicles is a really good example of that, where everyone's aware, and it's not just the fuel price that's driving it. People are making conscious decisions to switch to electric vehicles that now have the range to enable them to do something better. The cars perform well, People understand them because they're tech savvy in respect to the operation of those cars. But I think we're starting to see that with homes too. People are becoming more aware of what the net zero function is, but not the entire market. So we're still in the early adoption stage at multifamily level. It'll be interesting to see, for example, how things like the curve and some of the passive house towers and things take off too. But again, it's certainly giving us confidence to think that there are enough purchasers out there that actually understand what they're getting into. And not everyone's going to afford a $1.5 million beautiful downtown high-rise condo. We're looking to offer something that's at a much more affordable level, townhouse level, in a suburban community. And yes, we're only going to build, not even 10% of the homes will be net zero, but it's a start. If the demand exists, we do have enough knowledge about what we need to do to take our typical townhouse and make it net zero, that on future projects we can pivot fairly quickly. But I guess in essence, test the market. And I'll be honest, it's a risk deciding to do 18 of these homes in one project. But I do feel the market shifting, and it's not just shifting in Vancouver or the North Shore. People are more holistically aware. Our youth and the next generation are so much more socially, when I say socially, technically, from social media literate, than I am, and they're aware of what's going on in the world. It's to be determined how many people buy purely because it's net zero ready. We've got to remember, and three of the big focuses there are the home's going to cost less to run, it's going to be healthier, it's going to be quieter. And some of these other factors may appeal to someone more than just purely the net zero certificate. A great example, I once got talking to a homeowner. They were a doctor and they worked night shift, and they deliberately picked a very specific unit in this building I built because they'd worked out it faced into a courtyard, it had a good sort of west-facing look, but it was going to be quiet so they could sleep in the daytime. And it's a side story, but we know that these net zero homes, they're going to have outsulation, they're going to be airtight. But with triple glazing, for example, they're going to be quieter. And it's going to appeal not just to a doctor that works night shift, but to young families where they want the kids to get to sleep. A great example of that is I have the fortune, obviously, in that we're building other townhouse projects where we've deployed higher efficiency glazing systems. And I have literally stood in a home with the windows shut, a home we're finishing, looking out across a construction site, and you can't really hear the construction. You open the window, you can hear it. Close the window, it's quieter. So it's already proving itself out, and they're only going to get better at that higher level. And so above and beyond just the demand for the people that truly have understood and engaged with what a net zero ready or a net zero home is, there are people that will be the more efficient, the cheaper to run home will appeal to them, the quieter home, the healthier home. Different people have different priorities. But if we can, over the next few years, and we're certainly planning to tell the story about more holistically, but over the next few years, industry leaders, people like I mentioned, the CHBA have the net zero program. The more we can do to tell that story, the more we're going to see adoption. I'm a bit of a car nerd, and it's kind of interesting to think Rivian, their first launch location in Canada is BC, and it's because they're able to see the market, but the market can see the value in that electric vehicle. And I think BC is a leader in this market too, and hopefully that will result in CHBA, BCIT, but also provincial and municipal governments really starting to help promote. And I do have to applaud the Township of Langley at this point. They've worked with us collaboratively through this process. Once we made the decision to pivot, their sustainability, building, engineering teams have been wholly on board with us and have been accessible. That's a function of what we're offering to do, which is granted helps us, but it's not been lost on them what we're trying to achieve for the community. And that has made the process easier. Again, going back to the first part of this, why not all of them? We need to see how much of the market's truly on board at this point. But I do think that once we start to sell the story, and I'm confident that we're going to see these homes sell successfully. And I'm going to be honest, at this moment in time, we haven't figured out exactly what they're going to cost. We may choose to keep them priced competitively and bear some of that cost so that we can get homeowners in and actually hear the last part of the learning. It's beyond me, it's beyond our design team, it's beyond our construction team. What are the challenges for a homeowner until we get a homeowner in a townhouse, in a net zero ready townhouse, telling us their challenges? And we're going to engage with these homeowners. We know we are, and we're going to try to remain connected with them. We can't truly learn. So I don't want to make a commitment to build everything at that level until I know where all our pitfalls, our hurdles, our barriers exist. But I do believe by 2030, we will be at this level as an industry. And by us getting ahead, we'll have learned those pitfalls quicker than others. If you're watching me, it's because you perhaps want to learn more. Where do you go next for yourself? It's not that you can, very few multifamily builders can just straight jump into a net zero home. There's a lot of learning to get done on the way. And I think the biggest message is you need to understand your existing buildings and what you're building, and because each multifamily builder, you have your pool of favored trades, the teams that you go to time and again. You may want to keep working with a mechanical trade that you really like. That's great. They may not be there yet either. So you may need to think about taking them along this path with you, saying, hey, I want to get to this. Let's both find out what we've got to do. Got to remember there's a sell for them too, because the sooner they become educated in what needs to be done, they're now able to offer that to other clients too, which improves in essence their value beyond the actual work they do, the value offering. But getting back to yourselves as a multifamily builder, you do need to understand how your existing buildings perform. So reach out to an energy modeler, get an EnerGuide rating started on your homes. Even if you're not telling your homeowners how they perform, at least have that data for yourself. And there's several functions to it. Part of it is the air leakage test, but part of it's the modeling. Understand, we all know we have to do step 1 homes, maybe step 2. They're not huge leaps. Even step 3 is not a big leap, but I warn you now, the leap from step 3 to step 4 is quite large. The jump down in air leakage rating, the mechanical efficiencies, the thermal energy demand is significant in a Part 9 home between step 3 and 4. And you need to understand how your existing homes perform. So like I say, engage an energy modeler, and you can find them through CHBA and HAVAN, their listings, they have them on there. Also the Provincial Clean BC site, you can go in and find local energy modelers. Take one of your homes just before you get occupancy even, just go in and do that air leakage test, do that model, work out how it performs. And what you'll find is it's like everyone's going to be slightly different. One of you may have a home that's got a really good air tightness, but actually because of the mechanical systems you've deployed or whatever, you've actually got a poor MEUI, mechanical energy use intensity. So now you start talking to different people depending on how it performs. What do I need to do better? Or maybe let's say your air leakage is really bad. Well, there's various factors. And the testing protocol for townhouses is, if it's not been put in place, is being revised by under the step code because of the party wall. And that's the unique thing with townhouses or row homes for that matter. Under the Part 9 buildings, you've got air leakage that doesn't need to be addressed from an envelope standpoint into a neighboring property. What are you going to do there? How are you going to seal that party wall up better? Different people are doing different things. Some people are actually air sealing that wall, and that's not a bad thing. But there has never been a definition around what to do with that party wall. So yeah, you may have sealed up the outside. On some of these middle townhouses, you've got a front and a rear and a roof. But you might be actually having excessive leakage in 2 other directions that you're not aware of. Beyond that, let's say you've done your air leakage test, you've done your energy model. Now it is a question of actually saying to your modeler, what do I do next? The EnerGuide rating and the energy report, if you imagine you were doing it almost as a homeowner, does come up with a list of recommendations, and you can start to nibble at those things. We're all understanding LED lighting. We all understand what it takes to get to a tankless, 97% efficient hot water tank. But there are other options. I've mentioned the Rheem heat pump hot water tank that I've put in, and we're looking at what we need to do in our net zero homes. But there's Sanco, A.O. Smith, there's a whole load of others that have got options out there. In certain locations, that net zero might be, what does it take for a townhouse project to connect to a district energy? How do you handle district energy distribution in townhouses that are on grade versus, say, townhouses over a parkade? There are all these different things, and depending on every individual circumstance, you'll be able to develop a plan and a strategy. A warning: if you go with a district energy model, even not just townhouses but condos, make sure you've got a plan in place to bill the use of the energy. And I don't just mean for heating and cooling from a district energy system, but also hot water. BTU meters are not cheap, but make sure you've got a plan, because otherwise you can have a family of 5 living in one home using a large amount and a family of 2 in another home using a very small amount. The family of 5 are at home 24/7. The family of 2 are only there 2 days a week. It's in my opinion, it's unequitable to expect them both to pay the same rates. And going back many years, when we used to do in condos, for example, gas fireplaces were all off 1 meter. They were not individually metered. I've seen it in the interior where they may be considered a wreck property for most. Let's say you built 50 condos. Well, 3 of them live there 24/7. And I can tell you, I've firsthand spoken to that homeowner. They heat their entire home from the gas fireplace that the entire Strad is paying for through the winter. And those homeowners that only go there for a summer vacation or an Easter vacation, they're subsidizing that other person's heating bill. So make sure you've got plans around the billing and the energy. But again, nibble away through that list. Your energy modeler will become invaluable to you. Your mechanical consultant will become invaluable to you, because they're the big shift items. The other part that I haven't really touched on is the building envelope. And again, your architect and your building envelope engineers will become really important to you at this point too. The performance of the building itself is a function not just of the mechanical systems, electrical systems you put in there, but actually how does the building itself operate. And it's about air leakage. Your building envelope consultant is the person to help you to wrestle with and find the best fix for you. Air barrier may be the way forward for some of you. Airtight drywall approach may be the way for others. Exterior air sealing, a hybrid approach where your air and vapor barriers become one on the exterior building, is another approach. And everyone will find a different method of addressing this based upon the pool of trades they use. And the reason I say pool of trades is the trades that are working maybe in Northban, we can't get them to work in Langley, or those in Langley won't go to Richmond. And so everyone's a little bit different, and you're going to need to work with your group of trusted trades to find that solution. But you do need to communicate with them, and you do need to kind of work back and forth. It doesn't hurt to even think about, and we hear it more often these days, the integrated design process. You have everybody at the table at the start. We're not completely there. We're getting there. We're getting more and more involved, where we have mechanical trades providing input from mechanical consultants to mechanical consultants about how can we make changes to improve things. But that is another longer range function to contemplate as well, is what would an integrated design process be? At single family level, I mean, I can tell you our Foxridge team do it. They'll actually integrate the mechanical trade and consultant work so that they're actually cohesive and in one place. Like I say, we've taken a bit of a different approach, and we're actually considering possibly in the future doing design build mechanical, so there's one team actually seeing the entire thing through, where we just set them a goal, but obviously we've got to police them and work with them to get to that goal. I think, yeah, just holistically, once you've got that list, and you can find it, online, there's like there's a lot of websites that give you the 10 steps to being net zero, etc. Do your own research, find those 10 steps, get your EnerGuide rating, your energy report, start to work through those steps. And like I said earlier on, just keep talking to your consultants. Okay, what do I do here? What do I do here? They're all going through this, but the EnerGuide modeler, the energy modeler, sorry, and the building envelope consultants really are leading on a lot of this because they're wrestling with the day-to-day and they're figuring it out. Our consultants, our architects, etc., are starting to get there too. Don't forget your landscape designers too. It's going to sound silly, but once you start getting into LEED buildings and you look at water consumption, and this is more in part 3, it's about using indigenous and climate-friendly planting, for example. So you minimize your water and your irrigation loads. How do we deploy deciduous trees on south facades? So we've got passive shading in the summer, leaves drop in the winter. Now you get solar heat going back into the buildings. And unfortunately, the list is quite long, but as long as you keep talking to people and challenging them, what else can I do? You will get there. At Qualico, one of our big taglines is helping build better cities, better communities, and that's really important. And I think a takeaway from everybody is everyone's different. Everyone has different motives, different life experiences, but it's about understanding that it's more than just building your home. You're doing something in a community that's changing that community. Even if you're building just a single family home, it has changed the environment that it sits in, whether positively or negatively, that's independent opinion. But in changing that community, you need to understand that you're investing in that community, and that investment goes beyond the home. It doesn't matter whether you give back, but I encourage all of you to think about what are you giving back to that community as a result of the change. And it's maybe not just a better performing home. It's maybe it's a donation to the arts or an investment in the arts. Maybe it's looking at how can we develop parks. That we're seeing in the Fraser Valley. A big challenge in our industry, actually, as a whole, to be honest with you, is mental health and the opioid crisis, the drug and alcohol abuse or use problems we're seeing. Can you give back to a charity that supports something? And it's about demonstrating that bigger picture. And the ESG, coming back to that, it is more than just a sustainable home. It's a sustainable community. We may be donating to hospitals and playgrounds, for example, but maybe mental health is more important to you. And what can you do to service that? Maybe the food banks are important to you. We're all governed by our life experiences. Think about what yours are and where you feel you can make a difference. And as a result of building these homes and demonstrating to these homeowners that you care in this environment, it doesn't hurt to tell that story. We are seeing everybody starting to do this, and it's really powerful. I'm going to pick on Michael O'Dane and the arts, or Bob Rennie, the arts, great. I totally support what they're doing. But then there's other people that are investing in other things. And some of the townhouse builders, even out in the valley, are also starting to invest in different charitable functions. Tim Bonke's with Infinity, with Foundry and Langley Memorial Hospital Foundation, for example. The Brad Hughes Parkridge with the night shift. They're all identifying something that means something to them. And I encourage all of you to identify something that means to you more than just your home and your community, but it impacts your community. And look at ways you can invest back, because that is the broader community and the broader ESG piece anyway. So it's something to think about, and your buyers will respect you for having that investment. It's an indirect investment, but it's the income you receive from them that you're giving back to the community that they're in. And I think the more socially aware younger generations, in fact, I can tell you just from even talking to my own staff, are more acutely aware of what that is and what that means through social media and other things. We know that some of the younger buyers actually look at the developer, not just the project website. What does the developer do in the community? And it does make a difference. We've got stories from our sales centers where people are like, oh yeah, well, I know you were doing this, or I saw you help build the playground next to the community you're in. Great, we haven't done it just to attract them. We've done it because we feel it's the right thing. But it's a great story to hear that actually they're connected with what we've done. At the bigger picture and longer term, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for Qualico? It's not just about being kind of forced to walk down that ESG path, that environmental sustainable governance, and demonstrating it to the likes of our banks, our lenders, etc. But it's actually about what does it mean to our communities and our homeowners. The challenge goes beyond just building a net zero home. It's about staying ahead of where the current standards are, and we're starting to hear about where are we at with carbon. And I think we're going to see the GHGI factor, which already exists in the city of Vancouver, appear. We're going to see discussions grow around the emissions, the embodied emissions of the building. And at that point, by the way, Part 9 is in a great shape, would sequester carbon. But what does it mean for Qualico? Yes, we're able to present to those investors and those others that want to know what we're doing, where we're going on this path. Like I say, we've been Energuide ratings, so now we've got a benchmark, and we can demonstrate improvement over time of it. But it's also about, to be honest with you, about first off building a product we're proud of, but secondly, a product that we stand by and stand behind, and I think really becoming even better known. Qualico's StreetSide here in BC is only been here 10 years, but Qualico as a company has been around 70 years. So they do understand the importance of standing behind their product, but being able to stand behind that product at a higher level, I guess, is where this takes us. It's about being connected at that community level. It goes beyond just the performance of the building. It's about working in our communities, being involved in our communities, giving back to the communities. I'm not an expert on the ESG per se as a whole, but it goes beyond just that building. Like I say, it's about what do we do about waste on site during construction. And we've deployed commingled bins where there's not enough room, but we're diverting from waste. But in the long term, how do we set up the homeowners? So for example, in our homes, we put in sorters. Our homes are now designed, partly because the municipalities require it, for space for all of the different recycling bins, compost buckets, etc. How does all that function? How does that community connect to the rest of the neighborhood? We are operating in an environment that's going to densify and continue to densify. So access to public transit, access to SkyTrain become important, and we're certainly obviously focusing on opportunities like that. The net zero ready home is almost the first part of that bigger connected community, that bigger ability to be able to live and work, walk to school, walk to work, or commute without the need for certainly combustion engine cars. But that higher performance, getting to net positive homes. I don't know what that means yet, and that's my next learning thing. What does a net positive home look like? If we've only got a certain amount of roof space and we're trying to use photovoltaics, does the building itself have to perform even more efficiently so some of that power can go back into the grid? How do we connect in our communities? Qualico certainly works hard to be involved in our local communities and invest back in the communities, whether it's improving playgrounds, working with local hospital foundations, firefighter charities, etc. It is, the ESG component is a broader function than just our home. But we want people to know that when they're buying a Qualico or a StreetSide home, they're getting the quality, they're getting something that does what it says on the tin, but they're getting it, they're able to buy from a developer that actually cares about the community we're in. And we give back in many ways. Another example, we actually, every staff member, we encourage them, they get at least a day paid a year volunteering. And we want them to go out of the office and go and take part in the local food bank or a street cleanup or a stream cleanup. We've also been getting involved with Habitat for Humanity, and actually east of here, back in the other provinces, we're very active at that level. The other part of this, like I say, about saying what it does on the tin is standing behind our product. We are proud of what we build. We think we build a good product. You need to make sure it all will work. And that's certainly one of the risks in moving down this road, is we're deploying newer technologies. Are they all going to work? And it's about testing that too. And there's an important part there, and it comes back to the waste piece, ironically, which is one of the things we're really trying to focus on with our ESG right now. We do a pretty good job here in BC, but we're actually trying to help our other regions develop waste diversion programs. Well, if our homes perform well and do what they're supposed to do, the products should last longer. What we don't want to be doing is putting in a hot water tank that's no use in 7 years. We want a hot water tank that's going to last and work for a long time, because it's about, again, sticking with the waste thing, how do we ensure that homeowner's not filling the landfill? Or how can products be recycled? This is something, again, I haven't got my head around, but it's coming, is the deconstruction and the reuse of buildings. And it's something we're going to have to work towards in the future as an industry is okay, I've built a building with hardy panel. How does that hardy panel get reused if the building is taken down? We're going to continue down this path with Qualico and with our sustainability team. We're being challenged every which way about what else can we do, what more can we do, and it's about partly internal, engaging our team and having the team proud of what they're doing, but it's partly actually about what do we do better in our communities. What would I tell my younger self to do differently or better? I'm lucky that I got involved early on. I think in hindsight, I should have challenged myself to have learned even more at university, challenged my professors further to teach me more about this. It was in infancy stage, but I wish I actually learned more then, because my biggest challenge since has been, I've always kind of been wanting to stay on top of this and learn and know, but it's been the ability then to be able to eloquently persuade more people to make change quicker. And that's a failure by me in a sense, but it's not. I think I'm in a good place. But it's about keep yourself educated and just keep learning. Learning is a lifelong process in my book, and not just at work, but in your personal life too. But I wish I'd learned more sooner, and that sounds silly, kind of running before you can walk, but then I could have perhaps persuaded more people to change faster. And simple things, I understood the energy efficiency piece coming out of university, but it wasn't until my son was born that I started to understand and think about what is the world I'm leaving him. And maybe that's a good place to wrap is this isn't, I'm not trying to stand on a stool and tell everyone you've got to do this, and it is, we need to change our psyche from what do we get out of it from today, but it's about what do we leave our future. And you're going to run into walls and barriers. Rather than give up and go back to what you've always done because it's easy, challenge yourself to how do I get around that wall? How do I go over that wall? How do I go through that wall? Who do I need to speak to? You'll be surprised, for example, how many municipal elected officials are actually engaged in this. When you start to talk to them, they're aware that economically there's other restraints from us all getting this far, but if you're needing support, they'll support you. That was something it took me a long time to learn. But now that I know it, I'm not afraid to, if we need to get another project moving, and reach out to a councillor and say, I need your support to get this project going. I'm not afraid to do it. And that's one example of where I thought there was a wall and there wasn't. And yeah, I'm going to go back to that one piece. It is about thinking about what we're leaving the future, because if we don't make the change, we won't have the future we have now, or at least the outlook of a future we have. That whole, I'm going to get the year wrong, but the COP21 sort of thing about the bringing the temperature down, it is so critical. We only need to look at the loss of ice in Greenland, and the Antarctica, etc., and you can see why the province is worrying about sea level rise. Places like Richmond and elsewhere here in the Lower Mainland are genuinely at risk if we experience significant global warming, and our future generations will be challenged. There was a study done, I was involved looking at it with the UDI a few years back. The cost to this local economy is in the billions through sea level rise, and not the cost of putting in dikes and seawalls, but the loss of developable land and the loss of existing structures and infrastructure as a result of sea level rise. So we do need to make a difference. Our buildings impact the world around us, not just from how they look, how they feel to us, but actually how they perform and what they do to the environment. So yeah, think forwards, not backwards. It's probably a parting note.